Good morning, and welcome back to our daily 10-minute Laws of Pesach webcast. Today's webcast is in honor of Yudel Yosef ben Leah, who needs a blessing for a full Shalema. May this teaching of Torah be in his merit, and he should be successful in his operation today, and he should have a full recovery.
Amen.
Today we will discuss the laws of preparing your kitchen and koshering it for Pesach. With a brief introduction, I'd like to give a brief introduction, and that is that the reason we have to kosher our kitchen for Pesach is because obviously we used it for chametz all year round. Now, even though we are obviously cleaning the kitchen and cleaning our pots and cleaning our sinks and everything that we do, so there really is no chametz there. Nevertheless, because throughout the year we used our kitchen, whether it's the stove, the oven, utensils, sinks, stovetops, we used it all with heat. And the nature is that heat causes absorption. In other words, when you have, for example, a pot on a fire, so the pot absorbs when it's hot. For example, a soup. When the soup is hot, the walls of the pot absorb the substance, or at least the taste of the substance of that which is in the pot, into the walls. And even though later you will clean it, you can never get the absorbed taste out of the walls of the pot just by scrubbing it with soap. The method of getting rid of that absorbed taste is by koshering it. And that is why we have to kosher everything, because naturally everything has become chametzdik, and everything has an absorbed chametz taste in it, and therefore on Pesach, if you use it, again with heat, it will then extract that taste, and you will have a mixture of chametz in your Pesach food. So the method by which we kosher our kitchen and everything in it is basically, the rule in halacha is that kebolo kach polto, which means anything that you have to use the same amount of heat that caused this particular, let's say we're going with a pot. So for example, you had a soup pot. So the soup pot absorbed the chametz soup in the walls of the pot. How did it absorb it? Through boiling water. That's how soup is usually. You cook a soup and it boils. So that's the level of heat that caused the pot to become chametz. So you have to apply the same level of heat to extract that chametz taste. An oven you use on a much greater level of heat. It goes up to hundreds and hundreds of degrees. So you have to use the same amount of heat, the same level of heat, to kosher it from its chametz taste. And that's true with everything that we kosher. And we'll go through the details now. One last point, you may ask, why do we even have to kosher it? Let's even say that the walls of a certain item, the pot, the stovetop, the oven has some chametz taste absorbed in the walls. So how much is it already? It's so minuscule. And why are we worried about that? The answer is because on Pesach there's a strict law with regard to the laws of Pesach, that even the smallest amount of chametz is biblically prohibited to eat on Pesach. It's not like any other. Prohibition. Pesach is much more strict. The smallest amount is already a problem. The truth is, we have to kosher our pots even between milk and meat. If something got treif throughout the year, you also have to kosher it. But we won't discuss that now. But on Pesach, the prohibition of chametz is even the smallest amount. Our rabbis also tell us that although we are not actually eating any chametz, I mean it's just an absorbed taste in the walls of the pot or the oven or whatever it is, it's not actual chametz, but there is a rule in halacha which is called tam ki'ikar, which means the taste of something is like the substance itself. So although you're right, there's no substance here, there's just a taste that's absorbed in the walls of the pot, but that taste has the same law as the substance itself, and the smallest amount also on Pesach is a problem, and therefore we have to kosher everything. Now, before you kosher your kitchen or anything you're going to kosher for Pesach, you have to make sure that 24 hours passes. In other words, you don't use the particular item. Let's say you're koshering your oven. You cannot use your oven for a 24-hour period before you kosher it. So you have to leave it for 24 hours and then you can kosher it. Once you left it for 24 hours, you have to thoroughly clean it from any vestige of chametz, from anything. It should be pure, clean 100%, and then you can actually do the kosher. So let's go through the different items that need to be kosher. We'll start with your stovetop. The stovetop, there are two types of stovetops today in most homes. One is the older one, the older type of stovetop, which is electric coil, which is a much easier stovetop to kosher. You have to just turn on the burners till all burners till they turn red hot. Turning it red hot obviously koshers itself out. But then you have the in-between areas, the top of the stove itself, that are between the coil. For that you have to use a torch, and you apply the fire to the areas around the coil, and you have to make sure that it becomes very hot. So you go over each area slowly for a few seconds or a little more than a few seconds till it becomes hot, and that koshers it out. If you don't have a torch, my suggestion is that you should get one, but if you're not going to be able to get one, so I'll give you a secondary way to do it, although it's not the best option. If you tell you to boil up a pot of water and you pour it on the areas between the coil, but because, now here's the problem with that, the stovetop usually becomes chametz not just from boiling water. You can actually have a chunk of food that may be poured out of a pot, a hot knedel, for example, a matzah ball, or spaghetti, that actually touched the stovetop area, and that chunk of food is usually hotter than the hot water that it's being cooked in. And therefore, because that may have fallen, and the chances are that it did throughout the year, then the boiling water itself will not be enough to extract the taste that was absorbed because of the chunk of food that fell there. So that's why just boiling water is not really effective here so therefore I suggest the torch. But if you can't do the torch, pour boiling water and then cover it with aluminum foil for the 8 days of Pesach. That means you boil it, you pour boiling hot water on it, and then you cover it with a thick foil all around, and then you're much safer. When we talk about the glass stovetops, here we have a much bigger problem, because that you can't burn out with a torch. It probably will break it if you do that. So there you have a problem. So what my suggestion is, after looking into this every which way, what you should do is as follows. You turn on the four burners for about 10 minutes, let that burn itself out. Then you have to get a sheet of metal, a metal sheet that covers the whole area of the stovetop, and you put it on top of the stove and turn on all 4 burners. Let this sit there for 8 to 10 minutes. What happens then is the heat spreads around the whole surface and koshers it out. I do want to caution you that there is a slight possibility that by doing that you may crack. There's a possibility, it's not certain. I've done it before and it hasn't cracked, but they say that it could happen, so I want to just caution you that You should keep that in mind. If you're afraid to use that, to do that method, then there really is no other option other than buying a few other burners just for the Pesach and cook on other burners just for those 8 days, because these glass tops are a real problem to kosher. But I do want to tell you that it never broke when I did it that way, and you're probably safe. If it's only 8 minutes, it's not. That's the minimum that you have to do it for. You have to do it for 8 to 10 minutes. 8 to 10 minutes usually will not harm the stovetop. Your sink. The sink, if it's stainless steel, which most sinks are, you take a torch again and you go over the whole area, the surface of the sink, and you make sure that it is kosher properly. If you don't have the torch option, that's the best option. If you don't have the torch option, then you boil up again a pot of water, boiling water, and you pour it on the whole area, although that itself does not do the job. And the reason is because two reasons. Number one, even if the water was boiling when it hit the surface of the sink, that also may not be enough, because as just like by the stovetop, it's possible that an actual hot chunk of food fell on your sink, and the heat there was greater, a greater level of heat than just boiling water. The other reason is because even if boiling water would help for a sink, when you pour out the boiling water from the pot, when it hits the surface of the sink, it's no longer boiling. So it doesn't really have that level of heat. Therefore, if you can't do it with the torch, which is the best way, do this anyway with the boiling water, pour it all over, and then cover it with a liner. Meaning, there are today in the kosher stores, they sell plastic sinks with drains that you put in there for the 8 days, so you're covered pretty much, because even if the sink does crack throughout the 8 days, which it could, it's just plastic, but since you koshered it with the boiling water anyway, so between the two of them, you're safe. Let's talk about the countertop. The countertop has to be koshered in the same method. Best thing is to cover the countertop if you can, with some kind of a covering, and that's the best way. If you can't cover it, then you pour boiling water on the whole area, and then what I would suggest is you buy a couple of tiles, and don't put actual Pesach hot pots on the countertop, because again, the koshering with the boiling water is not 100%. So to that, and if you put the pot on a stone, it's not touching the countertop anyway. It's as if the countertop is covered, so that is that covers it. A microwave. Best suggestion is not to kosher a microwave. The reason for this is because the glass that you usually put the plates with the food, that glass cannot be koshered anyway, so you wouldn't be able to use the glass for the 8 days, that's for sure. And therefore it's probably best to just leave the microwave alone. If you cannot live without a microwave and you have to kosher it, then what you do is you take a bucket of water, or a large cup of water, you put it in there till it boils, and you leave it in, let's say, for about 45 minutes. You clean it out first thoroughly, then you put you put the water in and let it go for 45 minutes to an hour, and it koshers itself out. But again, you have to take out the glass pieces, and that you absolutely cannot use for Pesach. Dishwasher do not kosher, and that is because even if you can kosher out the walls of the dishwasher, the racks you cannot kosher, and I don't know how you wash dishes without racks, unless you want to get new ones for Pesach. It's complicated. Leave the dishwasher alone and wash your dishes by hands. Dishes, plates, cutlery. Plates cannot be koshered. Halachically, you have to buy new plates for Pesach. Today's days, I suggest that you buy everything new for Pesach, and as far as dishes, pots, pans, and things like that, they're so affordable, and there's no need to bother with koshering it. Kosher, not always people know how to do it. It's just best to buy everything for Pesach, and they're very, very affordable. If you absolutely cannot do that, then here's the law. Cutlery you can kosher one by one. You have to put it in boiling water. Plates, any kind of plates, cannot be kosher, so that you have to buy for Pesach anyway, whether you do china or paper plates, but you cannot use your chametz plates for Pesach in any fashion. Pots can be kosher, although I suggest buying new pots for Pesach. But if you cannot and you need to use your pot, you should then boil up a larger pot in which you can fit the smaller pot that you want to use for Pesach and entirely into the boiling water, and that can kosher it out. If the pot has a handle with a screw, you have to unscrew it and clean out the whole area and kosher it, and then screw it back. Pans cannot be koshered. The reason is because pans are usually the heat, the level of heat is with boiling with hot oil, and you can never kosher, and you can never get water to that level of heat, and therefore you will never be able to really extract the taste absorbed by the hot oil through boiling water. So there really is no way to kosher a pan. You cannot kosher pans. You have to buy new pans for Pesach. I think that does it. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful Pesach. And I just want to mention one last point about buying for Pesach. When you go shopping for Pesach, you have to make sure you go, even if you're going to kosher stores and you assume that everything is kosher for Pesach, don't make such assumptions. You have to look at every item to see if it's kosher for Pesach, because kosher stores today have two sections, for Pesach and for chametz. People, when they shop, they took an item, they don't really want the item, they just put it in the nearest shelf they're going out from, and there you'll suddenly have chametz among the Pesach goods. I've seen this happen, and I've come across this not once, many times. You have to be very careful. You take out of the Pesach section of the kosher store, take a look at it, see if it's got the OUP or whatever other kosher for Pesach label on it. Otherwise, you just have to make sure that everything's kosher for Pesach. Don't assume you're in a kosher store. They said there's a sign on top that says for Pesach products. Doesn't mean anything. Someone could have put in there a chametz product. Regarding your oven, the easiest thing to do again is to wait for 24. You clean it out thoroughly, wait 24 hours, don't use it, and then run a self-clean, which that koshers itself out. If your oven is not a self-clean oven, I don't see how you can kosher it. You're going to have to either call in an expert who will come with a real big blowtorch to go through over the whole surface and make it red hot, because ovens, it's not enough that it's just hot, it has to actually be red hot. And that takes hours with a regular torch. No, you won't be able to do it, and therefore I suggest that you don't use your oven for Pesach if it's not a self-clean oven. Just buy a convection oven for Pesach, and that produces some real good food. Thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow for the next section, which we will talk about the Erev Pesach, the day of Erev Pesach. So good luck, and kosher and happy and Zisum Pesach.